If you've ever set up a Facebook ads campaign, watched a YouTube video on Facebook marketing, or spoken to anyone about online advertising, you'll know that setting up your targeting is a pretty big deal. Or is it? What if I told you that targeting isn't as important as you might think it is if, and that's a really big if, you fall into any of these 4 categories? Which in theory means that if you don't need to worry about targeting anymore, you can put that energy into crafting better offers, coming up with better ad creative, or doing whatever it is that you want to do with that time that you've saved. But before I get into that, I need to catch you up to speed with open targeting. So let's quickly start by explaining what open targeting is. Now, open targeting is quite simply not using any specific targeting options, not adding in any interests, any behaviors, any demographics, just advertising to everyone within your chosen location. Often you would have the age range as just 18 plus, you wouldn't add in any detailed targeting options, and you would have the broadest possible audience, the most open audience, and that's what open targeting is. Now, we would never have used open targeting 6 or 7 years ago, and since then it's become a lot more popular. The logic behind it is that Meta has become a lot more sophisticated as an advertising platform, and the platform itself is so much better now at working out exactly who to put your audience in front of than it used to be 6 or 7 years ago. And often it's going to do a better job of finding out who to put your ads in front of than you as the advertiser are. So if you limit your audience significantly by selecting a specific interest, you're potentially missing out on all those people that don't fall within that interest categorization that Meta's not able to advertise to because you've set that parameter, that they would otherwise be able to work out, okay, this person isn't technically interested in this, but based on their recent activity, we think they'd be a good prospect for this business. Let's put an ad in front of them and see if they become a lead or see if they purchase. That's the logic behind it. Now, there are extremists that say you should only ever go with open targeting. Why would you go with any other option? Just let the algorithm, let Meta figure it out. That's always going to be the best approach. And some of these really strong advocates for open targeting wouldn't even retarget. They wouldn't make an exception for retargeting. They would say, Meta's going to figure out who visited your website recently or who's on your email list or whatever. So just do open targeting and the people that need to be retargeted will be retargeted. Now, personally, I feel that that is a step too far. I think there are definitely scenarios in which you absolutely want to be specifically retargeting people. Let's say, for example, you were running an add to cart campaign where people who had added something to cart but had not gone ahead and purchased via your website, you wanted to put an ad in front of them to help get them over that final hurdle with, say, an exclusive 10% discount. You've probably seen these sorts of things. Lots of businesses use these. Well, you can't really do that if you're not going to be retargeting. You might not want to offer the 10% to absolutely everyone in an open targeting setup. Likewise, if you're using the omnipresent content strategy, which I'm a big fan of for service-based businesses, expertise-based businesses, where you have a high average customer value and you need to demonstrate to your prospects that you know what you're talking about, that you can deliver good results, that you are trustworthy, that you've done work for people just like them in the past. You need to tick all these boxes before they're ready to work with you, and you can do that in an omnipresent content strategy because you are guaranteeing that you're putting many different ads in front of people over time that do tick all those boxes. How can you do that if you don't retarget? You can't really do that. By the way, if you want to know more about omnipresent content strategy, I'll include a link in the video description below to a video that shows you exactly how to do that, how to set it up and all that sort of stuff. So for me, the not retargeting side of open targeting, that element, that's just too far. I think that's too extreme. But we also have to discuss the other side of it of, is open targeting always going to be the best option as a cold audience targeting option? That is a much more interesting question. And I do want to state at this point that I am by no means against open targeting. We use open targeting a lot. In fact, I would say that it is commonly our most successful cold audience targeting option. But it is not always our most successful cold audience targeting option. I think that's a really important distinction. So in a minute, I'm going to go through exactly when we would and wouldn't use open targeting, when I'd recommend you do so. Before I get into that, I just want to quickly mention our done for you Facebook and Instagram advertising service. If you want my company to create, manage, and optimize your campaigns for you, help you get significantly better results, take that workload off your hand, and you want to find out more information about that, you can click on a link in the video description below. That'll take you to a page on our website where you can go ahead and book a call in with one of my team members, find out more information, no obligation call. Hopefully we get a chance to work together. So as an agency, when do we like to use open targeting? Firstly, if an ad account is fairly mature, you've got a reasonable amount of conversion data in there, we find that open targeting tends to perform better. And that makes sense because if you've had more conversions take place, then Meta understands what a conversion is for your business, the types of people that are likely to convert, and all sorts of other data points like what time of day are people most likely to convert, what day of the week are people most likely to convert, how many impressions on average does someone need to convert for this business. They have all this data they can use to get you the better results. So we're often looking for accounts that aren't just brand new ones that have some conversion history. We're also more likely to use open targeting for businesses where their product or service has broad appeal. So for example, if you're advertising jewelry, that has massive appeal. You can advertise that to the general population and know that most people are either going to be wearing jewelry or have someone in their life that they would buy jewelry for. So it's going to hit a really large percentage of the population. If, for example, you're selling Springer Spaniel dog training programs that's specific to that breed, is open targeting going to perform as well? Probably not. You want to reach the really specific people that have Springer Spaniels and that training program is right for, okay? So how broad is the appeal of your product or service? That's a determining factor. Now, with that said, as the years have gone on and as we've been using open targeting more and more, the criteria that I just mentioned, the requirement for those to be substantial is coming down. I'll explain what I mean. Before we might have said, all right, we're not going to do open targeting if we have an account with less than 1,000 conversions. That number is coming down all the time as Meta's machine learning processes, as their AI gets better at working out who to target. And we will now test open targeting with brand new ad accounts. It's still likely to perform better with mature ad accounts, but we will test it with brand new ad accounts. The exact same for the niche product or service versus the broad product or service. Before, we would only do it with those broad product services that appeal to tons of people. Now we are more willing to test it with more and more niche product services. There are things that are really very specific on one end that we still struggle with. We tend to find we don't get the best results with open targeting with those, but there are ones that will work really well now that are fairly niche, and we'll see open targeting perform really well, that maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, wouldn't have done so well with open targeting. So the barrier to entry, as it were, for open targeting is coming down all the time. And if you do decide to test open targeting and perhaps it doesn't work as well as some other options for you now, as your ad account generates more conversions, I'd encourage you to test it again in, say, 6 months' time, and then maybe again 6 months later. At some point, it's quite likely that open targeting is going to be your best performing cold audience targeting. We are also much more likely to use open targeting if we're advertising a local business or one that operates in a country with a smaller population. So if advertising in the US, for example, nationwide, we're going to test open targeting against a bunch of different other detailed targeting options, interests, things like that, lookalikes maybe. If we're advertising in a country like Ireland with a population, say 5 million-ish, we are much more likely to rely on open targeting, because once you start adding in those detailed targeting criteria, you really narrow that audience size down. And we know that Meta campaigns generally perform better with larger audiences. One of the reasons why open targeting is working so. And that dynamic is even more exacerbated if you're advertising on a local basis. If you're just advertising to a town of 100,000 people, there's basically no targeting option you can go with other than open targeting. If you're advertising to a city of 500,000 people, 1 million people, we're almost certainly going to be using open targeting, and that's going to be our best performing cold audience targeting option. Maybe you get into the point where you could start using like a 10% lookalike or something, but for the most part, with those smaller populations, you're going to have to go with open targeting. So that's something to really think about, particularly if you're advertising for local business. When you test open targeting, it's also important to be aware that it can take a little bit longer for that to start to deliver good results than more specific interest targeting options, let's say, because you've got more people, there's more things that Meta need. When you narrow it down to, say, a specific interest, you're only giving them one, maybe a few different groups of people within that to target, and they're going to sort of work it out faster. Now, obviously, the downside to that more specific option is perhaps it doesn't run for as long, or it's not as successful and profitable once it's up and running, but that's just something to be aware of. If you run a test between, say, open targeting and more detailed, specific interest targeting, behavior targeting, things like that, and you only run the test for 2 or 3 days, you might see that open targeting is not doing well. If you ran that for a couple of weeks, perhaps the open targeting would work better. Those timeframes are always need to be adjusted depending on conversion volume. I get this question all the time: how long should I run an ad for to see if it works? And my answer is always, how far off your target CPA are you, and how many conversions you're generating? If you're generating 1 conversion every 3 days, you've got to run that ad for ages to know. If you're generating 500 conversions a day, you might know whether that ad's working within a few hours. The best targeting options change all the time as well, so make sure you subscribe and I'll keep you up to date. For example, right now Meta is introducing a hybrid option. I explain exactly what it is and how it works in this video here. This hybrid option is going to act as something between open targeting and a detailed targeting more specific option. It's really interesting. Go ahead and check it out.